Alright everybody, welcome in. My name is Joe and let's play some chess. Alright, so let's see if we can get back into our Reti games. I've been enjoying the gameplay that develops from these. These are flexible openings. They give us a chance to try to mix and match our openings. And they can even lead us into a King's Indian attack from the white side. We've been talking a little bit about the King's Indian defense. That basically are these hyper-modern, what they call hyper-modern, which is basically anything from 1920s onward, where we're using our long-range pieces to defend the center, while at the same time, we don't need to waste our pawns in the center because our long-range pieces are doing that job for us. The King's Indian attack is basically this same King's Indian structure, where we have the fianchetto, bishop, and the king right underneath. They are not the same. The King's Indian defense, the King's Indian attack are not the same, even though they share this kind of structure from the white side versus from the black side. The main difference between the two of them is going to be, well, first off, they're both incredibly flexible. That's their strengths, is how flexible they are. And so because of that, you never know exactly the kind of positions that you're going to run into. I'm debating on breaking open the center, but no, I can't do that until I castle. Let me castle first, and now I can break open the center. And now if I need to trade queens, that's okay. We've got our central pawn breaker, our king's pawn breaker, just like we do in the King's Indian defense. So this is identical to the King's Indian defense setup, but it's on the offense, so the King's Indian attack. That's where it gets its name from. Now the question is, can I break open in the center? So if we count attackers and defenders, 1, 2, we only have 1. So if we push and our opponent takes with the knight, that leaves our knight under attack. And I guess we could rotate it down here. I'm not in love with that. I'm not in love with that. All right, so let us look at something else. One of the things I've been playing around with is maybe we just push e3 instead of e4. It's a slow move. We've got so many things that we want to develop. I think we go for it. I think we go for this. Maybe even trade off this knight. Get our dark square bishop outside of the pawn chain, so that way if we do close in the pawn chain, it's much better for us. Yeah, we're just going to go ahead and trade that off. Now this pawn is hanging currently. And if we can get into that square, that puts an attack on this queen, which gets us a fork here at the end. Now, I don't think that's going to actually happen, but it is an option to consider. And our opponent sees it and defends it. Good for them. All right, so maybe now's the time to bust open the center. So my opponent has 1 attacker, I have 2 defenders. My opponent could close it down, but then we jump in here and we do that. So if my opponent closes down the center, we jump the knight up with an immediate attack on the queen. My opponent's going to trade. All right, I don't know about this. This is a little sketchy for me. So for starters, we could remove the dark square bishop. That would be nice. I would enjoy that very much. For second, we're looking at this fork. Now, it's not a fork right now because the dark square bishop. If the dark square bishop were to move, let's say, drop back here, then that is a fork, and that becomes a yummy fork. But at this point in time, I'm happy to just trade this knight off for the dark square bishop and move on with our game plan, which at this point in time now is going to be our queenside pawns. This is kind of shut down our... Yes, I'm just going to grab here. Let my opponent have access there. And then start our queenside pawn move. Now, if my opponent grabs here, I'm debating on, should I come up this way first with a check? I don't think it really does anything, so I think it is grab. But then that does bust up my pawns. Maybe I should have brought the rook over first. Maybe I should have done that. Maybe I should have prepared this move first. Aha. So now my opponent has 1, 2, 3 attackers, or 3 defenders on this. I only have 2 attackers, so I do need to be a little extra cautious. But at the same time, I really like the idea of busting open the center a little bit. That would make me kind of happy. Now, if my opponent grabs, at the end of the day, I might have this check to pick up whatever's left over here. And I'm not doing the full calculations yet because obviously there's more defenders than attackers. Yeah, let's just go ahead and remove the knights completely. Give us this long diagonal. I'm secretly hoping he takes with the pawn. He takes with the queen. That's fine. Alrighty. So this is under attack. This is okay. This is under attack, so I need to defend both this and this. So I think queen up is a good way to do that for now. And then we can rotate the rook into the game. And maybe activate a hungry pig. Maybe threaten something along the back rank. Don't know. Now my opponent's got some things he needs to do. Obviously he's got his castling left to do. And that'd probably be a good option at this point. Just go ahead and castle and get rid of any concerns. Yeah. Nope. My mouse has been a little funny lately, guys, and it's starting to do that thing where it releases early. So putting a little pressure on this pawn, not a whole lot. I might even be able to get in maybe a queen lift, maybe look at... So if my opponent grabs, I grab back, and then I've got immediate pressure on that pawn. So let's go for a queen trade right now. See if we can get that in. He'd have to retreat to right here if he really wants to keep all that in play. And you know what? I could do the same thing. I could push my queen here. So an interesting game. This is how this is developing, an interesting game. Now, I am giving away 2 wing pawns for 2 central pawns, I hope. Now, probably the best move here would be the rook, to bring the rook into the game. Defending this pawn. So that way this queen is free to pick up my outside pawn. I'm trying to decide what I would do then. Okay, so I have to be careful of this. Because then that would be 2 attackers in this rook. So let's start by forcing this queen but he grabs here, and then I can grab there. Or do I just grab here? That's a good question. I'm wondering if I should have brought my other rook all the way over. I'm wondering if that would have been the go-to plan. See, my mouse is doing that thing. But now there's no way for this other rook to hit, so I'm not worried about 2 attackers in this rook. So again, we're at an even board. I've got 2 pawns in the center. He's got 2 pawns on the outside, or they've got 2 pawns on the outside. Now, they are fully passed pawns, or my pawn does have a blocker in the way. So I've got 1 true passed pawn, or my opponent has true twin passed pawns. If he pushes here, I don't really know. Yeah, it's probably a good move. My queen is not defended. I would like to defend the back of this pawn chain. But I also want to grab the open file. I think that's important too, right? That's a good strategy. We're moving towards an endgame, so some of these positional things matter. Now, I'd really like to get the queens off the board, so my opponent doesn't have any surprise attacks, but at the same time, there's nothing really to worry about just yet. If the rook comes over, I'm going to bring the bishop down. Put a defender on this. Or maybe I just push the pawn, with the thought of eventually pushing it again and letting my e-pawn be the backwards pawn, and maybe even look at pushing my f-pawn to defend it. I don't know. That might be a strategy. So I've got to look at my opponent's board and see what my opponent could be doing. Can't push that because he drops the... No, he doesn't, because the queen is defending. So we might see an f-pawn push by my opponent. In that case, I would bring the queen all the way back and just really force a queen trade. This drops here. So I should be able to get one pawn out of it, maybe. So at least we can stop the connected part of the connected passed pawns. My queen is undefended, so I really got to be careful there. A very, very, very even game at this point in time. But these are exciting, and this is why I like playing these games, y'all, because they're exciting to me. They're very interesting. I'm going through my brain trying to calculate different things what my opponent could do. What's their most likely move? Very good, because I don't have access to this attack. I am not liking this. Just wondering where they're going to put their queen next. I mean, they've got access to this. They got access to all this. This I've got here. But they don't really have an attack yet. Neither do I. We're just kind of repositioning things around. I'm getting a little bit of a time advantage. Nothing great. Let's go ahead and trade the queen. And then pick up a pawn. Now I have to be careful getting my rook underneath this passed pawn, because I don't want it on a light square, obviously. Alrighty, so now my opponent can't push the f-pawn because their bishop does hang, but I can get my rook underneath the passed pawn, which is a big deal. It's very important. Just get my king out from underneath the pin, so that way this bishop could come alive. I'm going to have to push my my pawn here, so that way my bishop can get out to help defend the queening square. Very, very, very close game. I take, he takes, I can go here, and it's a dark square. I'm okay with that. Dark square, can't promote. So I'm happy there. Don't have to worry about this anymore because my king is hidden. We'll push, we'll get our bishop up here, and we'll get another attacker. So we've eliminated the threat of the passed pawn. We don't have access to any kind of last minute checks from, so we do have to keep an eye on that. Our back row checks, I should say. Yeah, this is my opponent's. Obviously, that's their strength, and we just have to make sure it doesn't promote. And I think it's time for us to start pushing stuff. Oh, didn't see that. Oh, didn't see that at all. That's bad. I did not see that. All right, question. What's gonna be easier for me to defend against? If I trade here, it becomes a bishop and a queen versus a bishop. If I trade here, it becomes a rook and a bishop versus a bishop. That was a good move by my opponent. Fantastic move by my opponent. Fantastic move by my opponent. I do have 2 extra pawns now, but 2 extra pawns is no compensation for a full rook. Now my light square bishop would really like my queening square to be here, but it's not going to be that way. I'd have to push this pawn past. So I'd like my bishop to be able to control the queening square at some point in time, but I just don't know if I'm going to be able to defend this guy long enough. In fact, I don't know if I can defend this at all. I can't defend this. Takes. I can create an outside passed pawn maybe? Well, not a passed pawn because he's got the doubles. I'll offer my opponent a draw when time gets super low. No, I can't do that because he can bring the bishop here. Just got to defend this pawn. My bishop can now get free to roam. And I'm thinking I might even be able to... I should have gone here with it. I messed up. I should have gone here. No, because then it gets pinned. I'd like to get my bishop up along here. So he's going to go after this backwards pawn. Nothing I can do about that. Except maybe to give up this. I'm thinking if I can get here, put my opponent in check, I can pick up a pawn this way. Oops, I hit the wrong button. It's up to my opponent to find a way through here. Time management is an issue that people have to be concerned with. I'll give him the draw option. He obviously got me into a better position when I dropped a full rook, so I'll give him the draw offer. My opponent does not want to draw, okay? Opponent can't go here or here, so he has to give me this pawn. And now I have two connect the pass pawns. I'm just going to pre-move a couple of basic moves, just in case. I just don't want to give my opponent any opportunities to sneak back into this game. Let's go this way. We have completely cut off my opponent's king. This comes with check. He has access to this one, but I'm gonna take this one. And now I get a queen. Comes with check. Takes. Now let's go here. And then we always have this outside pass pawn. And then we know how to checkmate with a queen and a pawn. And now we just follow our endgame training this way. We need to get our queen here. Now we move the king. These are all cut off. My opponent has to go backwards. These are all cut off. My opponent has to go backwards. Opponent has to go backwards. He's looking for a stalemate, and I understand. So these are all taken away. These are all taken away. But notice this one and this one are not taken away. So all we have to do is put our opponent in a position where he can't go forward and he has to go backward. And then we go here. Notice he has this square available to him. We waste a move. And then we checkmate. GG, well played to my opponent. We got the win. We shouldn't have gotten that win, but time is a thing. There's a reason why time management is an important part of playing the game. We have to make sure that we don't end up in a situation where we make mistakes. Now, I've been fortunate that I've been studying my endgames a little bit, so I know a little bit about where I'm going, but it is still something that we need to pay attention to. I have lost plenty of games on time. I've lost plenty of games by blundering. I did offer my opponent a draw, so I did what I felt was the noble thing to do. My opponent decided to decline it, and so we move on. All right. So here we are in this Reti style opening, going into some kind of King's Indian attack. Yeah, Indian attack, but it's the King's Indian because it's on the king side. It doesn't even show it. Okay, let's get rid of this. But as we continue to play, notice we go for this long range pin, just going to trade off, yeah, and the engine agrees with me, just trade off that dark square bishop because we don't really want it around, and more importantly, we just like to get rid of some of the stuff around our opponent's king. Now, continuing developing, I went knight c3, and the engine wants me to go knight c6, or knight d2, excuse me, but knight c3 is still up there. I've played the Catalan lines from the Queen's Gambit, where both of these pawns are pushed up here, right? This pawn and this pawn are pushed up here. I've played the Queen's Gambit with the knight in both places, the Catalan with the knight in both places. So I don't think it really matters. I decided to go up here because I was looking at this free pawn. My opponent played it very smartly. Fantastic move by my opponent. Knight moves backwards are some of the hardest moves to find. So the fact that my opponent found a backwards knight move to help defend, good on him. And yeah, the engine is saying bust open the center. Oh, right, even better. Queen has to move somewhere, and then we can still trade off the dark square bishop. Okay, even better. It'll be a grab with the queen. So yeah, so I tried to open up the center. My opponent chose to close down the center, and now we know that play is coming to come on the wings. So this is the line I was looking at, was this. But then I didn't know how to defend this pawn. It just becomes a lost pawn pretty much, so I'm going to end up losing a pawn. It's very far advanced. So this is the thing with pawn play, okay? If you look at the board from a standpoint of my territory, your territory, my territory is all this stuff down here. My pawn has transitioned into enemy territory, and he's a lonesome pawn, undefended out here in enemy territory. This is going to be very difficult for me to hold on to. I'm sure there are ways. I'm sure that, you know, I could just make my own backwards knight move, right? And maybe rotate my knight around or something. I'm sure there are ways that I could defend this pawn. But a pawn that's already made the jump into enemy territory all by his lonesome is going to need help. And it just becomes strategy from that point on to try to defend that pawn. Now, if I was up a full pawn and this was a freebie pawn, then yeah, sure. I'll use that pawn as kind of a, you know, I'll just, you know, keep defending it long range. You know, maybe I'll develop my queen up here like I did in the game to defend that square. And yeah, maybe I'll rotate my knight around. You know, maybe even something like this long term. I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. But the idea being, if that was a freebie pawn or if I was up material, then yeah, I can use that as kind of a way to drive a wedge, knowing that this is going to be a sacrificed pawn. Now, we're currently dead even in material, and I don't really have any good strategies to use with this pawn, so it would become very difficult for me to hold on to. If you look at the engine says 0.8, where we go the line I did. So yeah, the engine says it would have been better to go for that line and trade away. So go figure. Even though funny enough that from here the engine wants me to go this way. Oh no, I read that wrong. 0.8 in the wrong direction. Right. 0.8 if we go this way. Yeah, that's 0.8 in the wrong direction. That's 0.8 for black. Excuse me, I misread that. Whereas this is a 0 or a 0.2. So half a pawn better by going the route that we took. So go figure. We did something right. All right, moving on. What else did we do from here? We pushed our pawn. Yeah, this backwards knight move. Probably what I should have done. Excuse me. Yeah, I'm really surprised my opponent didn't just take here. Because I was really hoping to have these two connected pawns do something. But they really didn't do anything. Yeah, my opponent made the really smart moves here. And then from here, wow, it really seems like black has a better position. I'm surprised the engine feels this way. I feel like this should be pretty even, except for the fact that I've got two pawns in the center. and I've got a better structure on the king side. So I don't know why the engine really likes. And look, it's half a point. It's not that big of a deal. Yeah, I really should have put more pressure on defending these two pawns. Okay, so getting a rook to the open file is a good move, but we should have done it with the f pawn over instead, right? That seems, and yeah, the engine agrees. In fact, I said it over the game that I should have probably used my my f rook. It does two things. Number one, it clears the space, but it also allows my rook to defend my A and B pawn, which we saw black was able to gobble those up pretty quickly. So yeah, a little bit of an oof here. We traded pawns. So I was seriously debating on just taking here. The problem is this, and then if I retreat now, yeah, I'm losing a full rook because two attackers. So I guess better would have just been trade off a whole rook. Well, I guess that does come with an attack there, but I'm not certain how. Yeah, the engine hates this because that comes with check. And then, yeah, boom. Trouble, trouble, trouble. And you can't even do an attack. So yeah, that would be bad. All right. Well, I'm glad we didn't go for that path. Excuse me. But at least we got our pawn right. We kept the board as even as we could. Yeah, we did bring our other rook over. Wow, I'm surprised. Oh, the engine really wants me to start pushing this pawn right away. I'm surprised the engine says that black has a little bit of an advantage here. I felt really strong about this. I felt really happy. I felt like I accomplished everything I wanted to. Wow. Wow, the engine really trades. Yeah, and the engine can see in the future, right? The engine can see way more moves in the future, right? 20, 30 moves in the future. I can't. And so, yeah, this pawn absolutely became a massive, massive liability. I thought I was doing good things by breaking up that pawn chain, but no, indeed. There is checkmate in 5, and I completely because the same exact move that my opponent missed, thankfully. I cannot believe what a move by my opponent. I just didn't see it. So this is a tactic that definitely need to work on for myself. This is just a straight tactic, right? Yeah, I should have come down. But even then, I'm going to drop a full rook because I can't defend that any other way. Yeah, any way we look at it, we're dropping the full rook. Because even if I come down this way, yeah, you got this move, which now you're stuck because now this is queening no matter what. Or you trade into a queen, or oops. I guess I could block it, but no, then you just get this again. Nope, then you can pick it up. Okay, maybe not. All right. Moving on. So my opponent missed checkmate, but did pick up a full rook here, so good on them. This was just a fantastic move by my opponent, and yeah, luckily the best move in this position is just to pick up the pawn. So you're down a full rook, but you're up 2 pawns at least. And I think here my opponent should have just grabbed. Well, I guess I can grab back, but giving me the 2 connected pawns seemed, wow, the engine says that pawn push was miserable. Because this comes with check. Yeah, just push, then what? Oh no, I can't push because that's defended twice. I gotta run. And then, yeah, then black just plays cleanup crew and picks up all my stuff. Oof. Man, oof. If my opponent had more time on the clock, probably would have picked up. As well as they were playing on the front half of this game, I think that they would have noticed all these things in the back half. And then our end game, the beginning of our end game training that we started to do has 100% helped us here. We turned a real losing position. We identified the key squares, and we just kept defending those squares so that our opponent couldn't pick them up, right? There's no way I can defend all of these. That's just too far apart. But these, I can defend both of these. Oops, I hit the wrong button again. Man, I am having issues lately. So yeah, we can't control, these pawns are just too far apart for our king to defend both of them. We do have all of our pawns on dark squares. That's hugely important because my opponent has a light square bishop. So we fixed all my opponent's pawns on places that I can attack, but he can't attack. So by fixing my pawns on dark squares versus a light square bishop, that's an advantage. My king cannot defend both of these. Cannot defend both of these on the outside, but these here in the middle, yes. And so my king was able to safely just basically defend all of them. You saw, I was just able to keep defending. Now, my opponent obviously has a ton of tactics here they could use, but under the time crunch, you can see that the winning advantage my opponent has is just huge. Yeah, this is defended, right? But this pawn can only ever be attacked once, so. And then we finally got our bishop back, rotated around. We were able to pick up that pawn. 4 pawns to 2, but a rook. And we just got in a position where we could, we're still obviously not winning this game. Our opponent just unfortunately didn't play the end game as well as they could have. Gave me too many opportunities, and I was able to take advantage of those opportunities in the end game, right? We were able to get ourselves set up, so now we have connected passed pawns. That was a mistake? Wow, why was that such a mistake? I'm really surprised that that was the mistake. Huh. I guess my endgame training is not so good, huh? Checkmate in 16. Oh, because that pawn is too far advanced. Right, that pawn is too far advanced. You can't do the thing where you hide behind the pawn and then promote it. The best I could hope for from this position would be a draw. Wow. I got very fortunate that my opponent played the way they did. All right, so I got lucky again. Yeah, this move right here, unfortunately, was where the mistake. My opponent should have gone this way, because then it's this. Yeah, realistically, wow, I didn't play this as good as I thought at all. I'm over here bragging on myself about my endgame skills, but realistically, all I was able to do is my opponent made this one mistake. Everything else my opponent did right. Wow, this whole game. Right here, okay, yeah, putting the king in front of the rook, kind of a mistake. You know, let the rook roam free. Everything else I did in this game, everything else I did. Yeah, the best I could hope for was a draw. But I did everything in my power to lose this game. Wow. I'm over here, I'm over here bragging that, you know, hey, I'm reading my Silman's book, wherever it is, right over here, right next to me. I'm over here reading my Silman's book, right? I'm going through it. I'm checking things out. I'm practicing. I did everything in my power to lose this game. And my opponent made the one unforgivable sin of moving the pawn away from the queening box. Right, so now this is the queening box. My opponent has to move into it, but can't because I block him out. So that's the only reason I won this game is because my opponent made the one unforgivable sin. If he had just taken with a pawn, now notice that we're going to be fighting over this. Even if we just do... I mean, at the very minimum, my opponent could force a draw because there's no way that I can get in front of this because it's covered. So at the very minimum, my opponent could force a draw here. But eventually, if you look at it, he forces me away from the pawn, picks up the pawn. It's a rook and a king against a king. I mean, hell, this is checkmate in one right now. So I did everything in my power to lose this game. Wow, I am so embarrassed right now. My face is sweating. That's how embarrassed I am. I cannot believe I did that. But I got very fortunate, and from here, we knew what to do. Yeah, and then my opponent is outside the queening square. My king is in this beautiful position that's this basically is called the red carpet position, because there's literally nothing your opponent's king can do to stop this pawn from promoting. I'm in the red carpet, and I can just continue to move and promote. There is no stalemate here, and then it's just a matter of getting your king or your queen into this box. 5 and 4, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. This is the box. Once your queen is here, then you just walk your king in and you push the opponent's king back, just like we did here. Notice at this point in time, I do need to bring the queen in a little bit to shut the box down. But you notice that we make sure that by doing so, we take away all the squares the queen takes away. We give our opponent access to some squares. We do not want a stalemate. The opponent's king only has a few legal moves. The best, yeah, even if he comes over here, yeah, all we're doing is we're just forcing the king into this box. We have the opposition. The king can only do one thing, so you waste a move. All you want to do is you do not want to open this wall up. You waste a move, whatever that move is, and this is a guaranteed checkmate. You can do the exact same thing with a rook. Doesn't have to be a queen. You learn that one pattern and you can do it with both a rook and a queen. The only difference is with a rook, you can actually close this box closer. You can close the box all the way down to give the enemy king just a 2x2. With a queen, you can't do that. With queen, you do have to give it a little extra space. Back on these, you do have to give it a little extra space. So as your king is closing down the box, because even if this was a rook, you'd be doing the same thing. You're closing down this box. You got to remember that queen diagonal. And a rook, you can bring that rook all the way to here. You can't do that with a queen. If the king goes here and you go like this, you can end up at a stalemate position. Boom. That's a stalemate. It's a draw. So you got to give the queen one more extra square away. You got to give the queen that one extra room. So you make a 5x4 box, then you close it down to a 4x4 box, and there's nothing your opponent can do. You just push them into the wall, and then once they're on the wall, you waste the move. And it works the same as if my opponent had gone this way. You could waste a move up this way and then close the door. But in this case, all I had to do was just follow the pattern, waste a move, because you want the king to be underneath your king. Guaranteed checkmate. And all you got to do is put your rook or queen anywhere on this back row, and it's checkmate. So we played a good game, I thought. But there in the tail end of the mid game, as we transitioned to an end game, I really blew it with a few moves. And then my end game skills are not as polished as I hoped they'd be at this point in time. So I've still got a long way to go. We'll keep working on our end game. We'll keep practicing. We'll keep reading our Stillman's book, our Silman's book. Excuse me. We'll keep reading our Silman's book. The best book there is for end games. It's really good. I'm enjoying it, but I've got a lot of practicing to do. So. Alrighty, guys. I appreciate you sticking with me through this one. We got the win somehow. Go figure. We got the win, but I appreciate you sticking with me, and I'll catch you next time. Thanks so much. Bye.